Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Amanda and Rich Show, and today we're going to be showing you how to study for exams.
So in this video, we're going to show you guys some specific study techniques that we use that seem to work for us, and we're also just going to give some overall study tips and advice.
So our first tip is to start studying early and not to cram. Something I like to do is to look at the material before class, just so I know a heads up of what's going to be on the actual lecture. So when I'm looking through the slides, I like to take note of the titles. That's what I put most of the focus on. And I put my secondary focus on the actual bullet points of the lecture slides. The main thing here to understand is that you're just trying to get an understanding of the material that's going to be presented in class, and not to memorize essentially everything that's going to be on class, because that's what you're going there to learn. And this is also a great opportunity to see if anything confuses you on the slides, because that's something to look out for during the actual lecture, and B, if it's not discussed in the lecture, that's a great question for you to ask your professor after class or during his or her office hours. So if I know lectures 1 through 7 are going to be on the exam, I'll start studying for lecture 1 as soon as it's complete, and then once lecture 2 rolls around, I'll start studying for lecture 2, but also review lecture 1. So you're reviewing the material consistently throughout the time, and B, once the test comes around, you're not going to be overwhelmed with all these lectures, and you won't have to cram for that test.
So one of the techniques that we used to help us study more actively and more efficiently was to condense our notes. So what we mean by that is you want to take, let's say, one lecture slide, you want to pick out the most important parts and summarize it in fewer words than what's already written on the slide, and you also want to put it into your own words so that way you're really understanding the information and you're actively learning. You're not simply just copying what it says. And then when you go back to review your notes, you actually have less notes to sift through, as opposed to going back and reading, all the pages of your lecture slide. So whenever I'm trying to put the lecture slide into my own words or to summarize it in a way that I'm using fewer words, I like to look up the definitions of words that I'm unsure of their meaning, because it just helps me summarize the material a little bit more easily.
So our third tip is going to be to break up your study time into more chunks rather than to study for 8 hours straight. So one example would be to set the timer for 25 minutes, study for that amount of time, and then to take a 5-minute break once that timer is up. Within that 5 minutes, you can choose to do anything, whether it's to listen to music, do a quick errand, or pretty much anything you want to do in that 5 minutes. But just have the mentality and have the mindset that for that 25 minutes you're just studying and that you will have a break.
So another thing that I like to do in order to memorize small facts or the tiny details that always happen to pop up on exams is to make fact notebooks. So I've talked about these in pretty much like all of our videos so far that have to do with studying, just because they really help me. Here's an example of one. It's really, really small. It can actually fit in like my pants pocket or my coat pocket, so they're really good to bring when you're waiting for class to start, or maybe just to read through before you go to bed, or if you're waiting online at the store, at the cafeteria. It's really good to have because it's just really convenient and really light. So basically, any facts that I was having trouble with, I would write in here. And the reason I like to do this is because I can just focus on memorizing one page at a time. And it just is a nice way to break it up. And it's just really convenient, and I can always have it with me for when I have downtime. But so here's kind of just like what it looks like. I just number, whatever the facts may be. And in this book in particular, I ended up with 77 facts. But anyway, these are extremely useful, and I think they're really helpful for when you're studying.
So for our fifth piece of advice, we're going to just go over different kinds of study tools. So our first one, you can use different programs to help you study. For example, there are some flashcard programs such as Anki or Quizlet that you can use to help you memorize some redundant terms that you may need to know. And another thing you can do is get creative in your study habits. And you can also color coordinate your notes if that helps you visualize what you're actually studying. If you're learning about the cell, it helps to actually draw out a cell and draw all the parts of the cell as well as label them. And the notes in conjunction with the actual drawing can help you, visualize and help you overall remember and understand the concepts of, for example, the cell in this case.
Another type of study method that is really important, and I think it's really helpful, is to do practice questions. We've also mentioned this in a few of our other videos just because it really is that important. The best thing to do is kind of figure out what practice questions are best for the type of class you're in. So let's say you are in a biology class. For me, the best sources for practice questions in my biology class were usually old exam questions or possibly MCAT practice questions, maybe like discrete questions on the specific topic I was learning. And occasionally I would find some good overview questions at the end of the chapters of my textbook. But for my biology classes, I really did kind of like to just stick to old exams if they were available to me. For a class like organic chemistry or chemistry, physics, those types of classes, it's really good to do just a bunch of different problems, and a lot of the time the textbook problems are actually pretty good and there's usually a lot of them. So that's a really good way to get in practice questions, and there's often a lot of workbooks available for those types of subjects as well. Another good source of practice questions can come from any worksheets that you got from your professor or maybe that you got in a workshop or a lab. Even if you've already done the questions in class, sometimes it's really nice to take a step back and redo the questions just to make sure you really understand them on your own. Something that's also really helpful is to create a study to-do list. In order to do this, I would always have a piece of paper nearby when studying to write down all the topics that I would come across that I was either struggling with or had a question on. And once I wrote down all those topics, I would kind of go through them and organize them in priority order. Let's say 1 being the most urgent, I really don't understand it, so I should spend a good amount of time on it. And then 10 being, it's not extremely difficult for me to understand, but I do want to kind of look at that again. By creating these lists, it kind of helps you organize what you need to work on as opposed to just feeling like you can't do any of it. It kind of gives you a plan and a method on dealing with the topics you're struggling with as opposed to, just like getting frustrated because there's a ton of things you don't know. It helps you come up with a plan so that you can do well on your exam.
So those are our tips on how to succeed in class. If you like our videos, hit the thumbs up button. If you have something to say, leave a comment below. If you like our videos, you want to see more of them, definitely subscribe. And until next time, see ya.